Welcome to the AKA Fitness Connect show. I'm your host, Amy King. Join us in this podcast series as we interview successful coaches from a wide array of health and fitness and wellness disciplines, as well as pros and amateur athletes or just fitness enthusiasts of all shapes and sizes. Here, we'll share valuable content to enhance your mindset, life and nutrition, all to help you along your epic personal health and fitness journey. Okay, welcome everyone to another episode of AKA Fitness Connect. If you haven't caught this podcast before, the idea here is to basically introduce you to peers within the industry who are successful coaches and athletes in their own right, and from a broad discipline across the sort of allied health, fitness and wellbeing community. So today I am joined with a very special guest, Chris Anastasios, who is a exercise physiologist. We'll go into that for those who don't know what that is. Chris has an incredibly powerful story, a huge, massive rig. As you can see, if you're catching the Zoom cast, it probably barely fits in the screen here. So Zoom, if you're listening, you might need to make these videos a bit bigger. Or Chris, I don't know, maybe step like really far away from the camera so we can get an idea around fitting you in. But anyway, I digress. So the whole idea, the golden thread of this kind of podcast series is for those who are on your own health and fitness journey, no matter where you are along that, is to kind of basically socialize you with all the different types of professionals out there that can be basically on your team to help support your journey. Chris in particular helps to work with rehab and all that sort of stuff, which we'll get into, but also for just ongoing kind of optimization for whatever your fitness and health goals might be. And he helps a range of people with sort of disabilities, injuries, and also athletes as well perform at their best. So really great special guest who's been doing it for quite some time. Anyway, I can go on about this, or I could actually just hand it over to actually let Chris just introduce himself, because I'm terrible at pronouncing Greek names for starters. So Chris, welcome. How are you today?
I'm good. How are you?
Yes, good, thank you. So Chris, how about we start with maybe just for the audience's sake, we'll talk a little bit about your own personal health and fitness journey, because you've got an incredible kind of rehab story, which I think will be really important for the audience. But first and foremost, why don't we, in case we've piqued the interest of the audience, do you want to explain what an exercise physiologist is, or commonly termed ex-phys?
Okay, so exercise physiology, it covers a pretty broad spectrum. There's a lot of different areas that we cover. I'm in more orthopedic injury rehabilitation, and that covers anything from sports injuries, motor vehicle accidents, chronic injuries and injuries from the people training incorrectly, or just accidents, I guess. So I'll also deal with, chronic conditions, medical conditions. There's a lot of different areas that come through, even metabolic, some cardiac as well. It's a bit of a broad area, but I guess a lot of the time I'm seeing a lot of spinal injuries, hip, shoulders, knees, that type of thing.
Yeah.
But I guess spine is the most prevalent that we've got coming through. And that's about it.
Yeah. So just to clarify as well, so an exercise physiologist is basically, you kind of do the same degree, right, as a physio, but instead of doing table work in the last year, you specialize in actual functional movement and more floor work, right?
Yeah, it's more gym based, especially the work that I'm doing. So it's exercise programming, exercise technique, modification. A lot of it's looking at biomechanics of how people are moving, joint position, muscle activation, timing, etc. So a lot of the time that'll play a huge role in their rehab, because we need to strengthen the right muscles and have the right load through joints in the correct manner for them to actually heal their injuries and their conditions.
Yeah.
Obviously people are doing a lot of the time they're training, they're putting effort into their rehab or their general strength conditioning training, but they're not doing that correctly because they haven't got the education behind them to perform the correct movements in the correct ways, or they're leaving things out of their programming, or they're doing something that they shouldn't be doing as well. So
yeah, excellent. And so my understanding is as well is that you've worked with a lot of people. You mentioned that you deal with a lot of people with spinal injuries, but we're not just talking like a slight bulging disc here. We're talking about significant spinal injuries, and you're getting them up to doing big compound lifts, which traditionally people will stay away with those kind of injuries. So yeah, so like what's, I guess, some of the most extreme kind of spinal injuries? And then in the turnaround on that, I know that you've managed to get them to do sort of heavy squats and deadlifts. So what's a couple of examples of success stories in that regard?
Yeah, like I do see a lot of police and ex-military. So I guess a lot of the big injuries are coming through from the ex-army in particular. I'm also seeing motor vehicle accident injuries coming through, and those can be quite horrific as well. I've seen one guy coming through that he'd been shot in the back with a shotgun. They were actually on a vessel, on a container ship. He was standing on a couple of containers at the top, and he got shot in the back. He flew off the containers from there, landed on his head, and then he had multiple fractures throughout his whole spine, upper and lower spine. A lot of the segments had to be fused. He had a lot of nervous issues from that, you can imagine. So rehab for that gentleman was quite extensive. And I saw him for quite a few months going over, again, exercise technique, correct loading of the spine, joint position, that sort of thing. I've also seen a car accident victim where the car hit a tree and she flew through the windscreen. She didn't have a seatbelt and hit the tree head first. They were traveling quite fast. So again, a lot of spinal fractures, upper and lower spine, cervical, thoracic, lumbar, and then subsequent fusions at all the fracture points. And she almost had, the majority of her spine was fused. A lot of surgery, a lot of rehab, a lot of deconditioning time, you can imagine, with the healing, and then recovery and rehab from there, strength work, building up from doing, simple, even walking correctly, to back into functional lifts, squatting and deadlifting. We start off obviously very, very light, get the technique right, get the movement patterns right, and then progress from there, and we can add weight, keeping that same good movement pattern.
Yeah. And so the thing is as well, like, I mean, obviously you do quite a good progression, but you often get people lifting in those heavy compounds more than what the average person in the gym could actually do. So what are the weights that, like a typical recovery might be able to push in a squat or deadlift? I'm not suggesting you try this at home, by the way, people, but just to demonstrate the kind of extraordinary transformation that Chris actually puts through in these clients.
Well, some of the police that have come through in particular, I guess, people don't realize their potential. So they've got the injury, they've got the back injury, they might have been training beforehand. They're at a certain level of strength, and then they get the injury and they think, that's really set me back. I've come back a long way. And in a lot of cases they have. But then we go through the rehab stages. I teach them the correct lifting. We do the correct movements. The programming is really important, what lifts they're doing and how often, for how long are they training, how many lifts they're doing, reps, sets, etc. So volume is really important. And then as we build up, we'll get through those rehab stages and progress, with some, we got different stages like hypertrophy, with strength, and then obviously moving forward, we want to get into power if they're going for that type of lifting. If they're heading towards those goals, then we can progress into more power and strength. And people are, average Joes that they've never squatted much more than their own body weight. So, for example, a 60 kilo or a 70 kilo guy squatting, 100, 120 kilos. And, we've gone up to even 140, 150, 160 on these guys and girls as well.
Yeah.
So they're quite shocked at how well they progress and how much they can handle, even after their injuries and surgeries, whether it's hip, spine. I see a lot of hip replacements, knee replacements, and knee reconstructions, and we still get a good progression with these people coming up, and they end up performing better than they were before, even previous to the injury.
Yeah,
So
that's awesome. Yeah, see, taking them from what they thought they could push through, they've been given a setback, but then you're actually driving them to 50% better performance at a minimum.
Correct, yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, so well done. Now I understand as well that you've got an interesting array of patients as well. So some with sort of neurodiverse, conditions, and some mental health, and potentially some overweight patients as well. We're not just talking a little bit overweight, we're talking about, in some instances, chronically obese, where they've been referred to by a doctor. And I guess you're pretty passionate around exercise, giving people back functional strength. But my understanding is as well that you're pretty, you appreciate kind of the mental health aspect of fitness, and just general well-being of that as well. So did you want to share some of your thoughts around I guess the importance of exercise in those regards?
Yeah, a lot of people coming through these days. I mean, like I mentioned before, most of the referrals coming through are for injuries. I get to see some chronic conditions, some chronic and complex conditions coming through. They're all doctors' referrals or specialist referrals. A lot of the people coming through have done some training in the past, but they've either given up, or it's been too hard, or the motivation's dropped off somewhere. And I mean, I guess the injury or condition that's come up has sort of forced them, they've been told by doctors and specialists that they need to rehab this somehow. And if the doctor or the specialist is smart enough to get them and encourage them and refer them to or an exercise physiologist, they're going down a better pathway then, and improving their life by increasing how much they exercise, their strength and their fitness. And obviously that's directed and focused on their injury or their condition, but also there's so many other benefits to them changing their lives in that respect to bring their health up. And there's no real exemption for people not to be training, not to be exercising, not to be lifting weights. It's not just you don't have to be a gym junkie to lift weights, or a competitor, or an athlete. Just the average Joe can lift weights, and they should be lifting weights. To be some sort of resistance training and cardiovascular programming in everyone's schedule. So I guess that's a key point. People realizing that, or being told that they're not exempt from doing that type of exercise work, just for their life.
Yeah. So what you're saying is that there's there's the actual the direct impact of actually rehabbing from an injury, but it's also the side benefits of people overcoming that sense of barrier, and then the sort of overflow into other aspects of their life and their mindset around, and just general health and well-being as well, that little bit of exercise actually helps them with. So that's great. Now I want to dive in. Now you've had a pretty how do I put this, accomplished kind of amateur athletic background in yourself, with across a wide disciplines of sort of martial arts, powerlifting, and so on. So we might talk about that. And then I want to share with the audience as well, I guess, some background around why you got into being an ex-physiologist, and I guess some of the personal barriers that you've had to overcome in terms of personal injury as well, because I think that story is quite extraordinary. By the way, if you ever see Chris in real life, he pretty much looks like he should be a bodylifter. I'm trying to combine like a powerlifting what do I do? Bodybuilding, bodybuilder. So he looks like someone who should do bodybuilding or powerlifting, which is great. But quite extraordinary feat considering, some of the things that he's been through in terms of personal injury. But more on that later. Let's start off with your personal fitness journey, Chris, starting from when in your teens, I imagine.
Yeah. So when I was younger, I guess starting in high school is when I started seriously training with a lot of martial arts, different martial arts, mainly Kung Fu. which is Wing Chun, which is a sort of a short style martial art, and another term for it is Chinese boxing. It was one of the styles that Bruce Lee was taught, and that kept me sort of focused, and I had some discipline from learning that style and the training. So that was quite good. So I practiced that for around 8 years, from sort of 15 onwards, and that came to an end. That type of training, martial arts, boxing. There's a little bit of wrestling in there. There's a few different styles that I practiced and went to different schools to learn. And I started combining that with weight training in my early 20s, probably about 19, 20 years old, and realized the benefit of the weight training to add to my strength and power, to combine that with the martial arts, and that was quite good. And I guess that brings us to the first motorbike crash that I had when I was 23. So that put a big halt in everything.
Yeah.
With regards to training. So I never went back to the martial arts after that.
So yeah. Because of the nature of the injury. But we'll just on that. Like we're not just talking about, when you say you did quite well in that, what level did you get up into Wing Chun? Was it black belt or?
I guess it wasn't achievement based in regards to, attaining a certain level. I mean, you go up and you get graded, etc., but it's more just enjoying the journey of just learning more and more. And I mean, I trained with a few close friends, and they had a lot more experience than I did. They've been training for 30 plus years, so I learned a lot of them, and that my teachers at the school as well. And then I guess it was good fitness, it was good fun, just the sparring, the boxing techniques, etc. And I guess I just enjoyed, obviously in high school I was in quite a few fights and things like that. So I guess that's what sparked things off for me getting into martial arts, learning how to fight and looking after myself at school and outside of school. So, but these days it doesn't really happen that often, which is good. So
what, the fights? Well, I would hope that you're not having fights in school, because that would probably be a bit awkward on so many levels. But but okay. And then so were you doing any other sports before that? And was the catalyst just was it your parents that sort of helped you decide to go into martial arts, or is it something that you decided to do? Were you doing any kind of other fitness activities prior to that?
Not so much. I mean, I did play basketball when I was younger, and a few other different sports. But I watched a lot of kung fu movies when I was younger, and I had friends that were training, and I got introduced to kung fu from one of those friends, and I guess that's how I got into it. Sort of never looked back after starting, because I just loved it. But just a bit of a shame with the motorbike crash stopping my training from that particular discipline, and then that's when my focus become more towards weight training and powerlifting.
Yeah. Now, so take us back to when you were 23, which was, for everyone in the audience, for the sake of this, there's going to be some creative embellishment, which was, roughly 5 years ago. It was a little bit longer than that, but anyway, yes, take us back to when you were 23. So my understanding is you were a PT at that stage, and then loved your fast bikes. And then and you said first motorbike accident. So why don't you talk to us about your passion for motorbikes and the pain that's come with that?
Well, like you said, I was working as a PT at the time, because I've been working in gyms since I was about 21. So quite a while. But I was working as a PT, and I was riding to motorbikes at that stage around the 21, 22 when I started riding, and didn't have a super fast bike at that time, but yeah, loved to ride. And one day, it was late November 2000 and 2020.
You
Was
can only
it
go back 5
2000?
years, remember? So, yeah.
You've confused me with the years.
Sorry.
2008.
Okay.
2008 was the first
Okay.
one. So yeah, had a big crash then. Car went through a light doing about 90 was the estimated speed. It was a hit and run. So, the car went through the red light, crashed into me. I don't remember anything from the day, which is probably a good thing. Just waking up in hospital, a day later. I think it was a day later, a day two later. And they explained to me what had happened. So massive pelvic fractures, AC dislocation, so my shoulder was smashed. But the main concern was the pelvis, and relocating my hip in the right spot, and then putting all the pieces of the pelvis back together, and then screwing it with titanium plates and screws. As you can imagine, I was in hospital for a few weeks with that, and then rehab was quite extensive. I mean, even from there, I wasn't allowed to weight bear for about 7 or 8 months.
Yeah,
So I just
wow.
had to lay down, and that was at that time I'd already enrolled into uni, because I was already directed towards or focused on studying exercise, human movement, or exercise and sports science. So I was enrolled. I started studying just from home, just online, because I couldn't walk for a while. And that kept me pretty busy, the textbooks, just learning a lot about my injuries in the body and physiology, etc. And I guess I was heading towards studying physio at that point. But further into my degree, I changed towards exercise physiology, because I realized it was more focused on exactly what I wanted to do, which is working in the gym with movement, with people with injuries, and the rehab that you get from the weighted exercise, resistance exercises, etc., gym programming, exercises and exercise technique, instruction was where I wanted to be, and that was my focus from there on. And I guess that turned out quite well for me, because I went through a lot of rehab myself. It took a number of years to rehab from that injury, and a lot of physio in the beginning, and then I guess exercise rehab following that. And it's been a big experience for me, and obviously not positive in some ways, but positive in others, because it's given me so much more knowledge and in-depth knowledge about
Live and
how
breathe
people
it.
deal with injuries. Exactly. Yeah. Trauma, the mental aspect of it, going from a full-time training, active full-time work to nothing, just being laying around in bed for so many months is quite tough mentally.
Yeah.
So when people come to me, patients, I'm seeing patients with it could be similar injuries, or injuries where it's stopped them from training or working, etc., and they're sort of, they come in down and depressed from that. And I can sort of we can share stories, and I can understand where they're coming from and help them come up from that. And that's a big part of what I try and provide to my patients with rehab, just not only addressing the physical side of things, but the mental aspect of rehab, and becoming stronger, mentally as well.
Yeah. And because and I think that's really important as well, because particularly, would you say that majority of your clients, from a split perspective, given that you work with so many military and police officers, that's more skewed towards men at the moment?
Yeah, probably more than the ex-military guys. I can't talk about it too much because of the limitations that DVA have, which is the Department of the Veterans Affairs. But basically, these guys are been through a rough time, whether they've done
Yeah.
combat overseas or just in training in general. It's quite tough mentally on them. Obviously the injuries impact on their mental well-being quite a lot, so it's important that this is addressed, and there's specialists obviously that they're seeing. We've got the myself, ex-phys, for their exercise programming and rehab for the physical side of things. They've got their psychologists and psychiatrists, but it's also important that I understand a little bit about where they're coming from and being on the levels.
You can empathize.
And
you can do it in a way as well that isn't pandering to them. It's more, I understand what you're going through and this is how we can get around it, or this is what we need to do to, and adjust their programming to suit and all that sort of stuff. So it's a very unique skill. And I think that's one of the things as well, right? Like, so much with, there's lots of different types of coaches or professionals out there to help you with your own health and fitness journey. But a lot of the times, it's the softer skills and the more subtler skills that people don't realize that, sets apart those who are able to help you better on your team. So you need to look at the whole person, right? Like, you're not just looking at a bunch of body parts moving around. You're looking at how that person is made up from an internal perspective, how their mindset is, and what else they're doing in their life, and working that programming to suit that, right? So and super important as well because so much rides when you're dealing with police officers and military as well. I mean, a lot of their identity is associated with what they can do physically, but also from a career perspective. So everything they do, and we're sort of a lot of us are judged on basically the professions that we are. So a lot of your identity is kind of associated with being physically active. So for guys, when that's taken away from them, there's a different kind of mental health kind of challenge with that.
Correct. Yeah. I mean, if they can't work, I mean, in the case of the police officers, they're off work for a certain amount of time, and mental health's really affected there because they're so used to being at work and being needed and having that role where they're feeling wanted and helping other people. So I guess it's tough if they're injured and they're just sitting around, for anyone really. I mean, police, doesn't matter what job you've got. The military guys, a lot of them are not serving anymore, so they have a medical discharge. So they're feeling like they don't have a job anymore. They're sort of, their careers sort of ended. What do I do now, etc., etc. But the exercise and the training really helps bring them back up, and then there's programs to get them back into different jobs, etc., etc. But the exercise programming is and the training is really what brings them back up to a good level mentally, and we're trying to go towards prescribing exercise programming and getting them involved with training instead of relying on these medications for mental health, what a lot of the doctors might be prescribing, which at end of the day not really helping.
They don't actually address the root cause or get you doing things. So that's I guess I just wanted to go back as well. You mentioned when you had the injury and you had all this time off, you'd already enrolled into a course, and you'd already, I guess in a sense, had already decided what your purpose was, your greater purpose was in life, right? Was to help as many people as possible recover from injury. That's a pretty specific purpose to have at the age of 23. So I guess, what role did that play in helping your recovery? Like, how what do you think would have happened, I guess, if you didn't, for you, knowing you, obviously being an expert in yourself, like, how do you think your life might have gone if you hadn't had such a clear direction on what you wanted to do?
It's a tough one. I mean, I knew that I wanted to work in some sort of fitness and health area, and because when I first left high school, I started studying business and commerce. So I did diploma business. Went to Curtin, started a degree, a double major in accounting and finance. So completely a completely flip side of what I'm doing now. Completely different, but I guess it was a good outcome was I realized what I didn't want to
Yeah. Okay.
do for the
Yeah.
rest of my life, and that look into sort of what I was more passionate about. I started thinking, this is definitely not it. I need to look into what I'm passionate about and what I really want to do as a profession. And then obviously I was really heavily into training and fitness and health, and that got me thinking about what options did I have for studying in that area. And I guess that's what put me into exercise and sports science or human movement, and then from that into exercise physiology.
Yeah. Awesome. And you haven't looked back since.
Exactly, yeah, it's been great.
Yeah. Awesome. Now, you did mention earlier, so I'm sure that the audience is wondering, the first accident happened in 2000, well, when you were 23. So what other accidents have you had?
So the second one that happened, I think it's been about 6 years ago now. So again, another incident with a car pulling out of a driveway. Came across the road, and we didn't actually make contact, but I had to swerve and brake to avoid it. And basically the car came in so close that it pushed me into the curb. I was traveling around 60, 70 k's an hour, and after that lost control of the bike and crashed into a construction site. So that was into the same leg, same side as the hip reconstruction. So I was a little bit worried about what had happened to my hip and what had happened to the leg, etc. But it ended up being some ruptured muscle, quad lat, etc., from the fascia. So just internal ruptures on the muscle and internal bleeding. Nothing too serious, nothing broken this time. So that was positive. And I was in and out of hospital within the day, so that was good.
Okay.
Scans came back all clear. And then just obviously very painful for the next couple of months after that with the leg. And I guess I'd already suffered some nerve damage from the previous accident. This probably didn't help. Another impact accident to the same leg. And again, like the internal bleeding, having the leg drained, etc. With these huge syringes. And following that is when I met he's a mentor of mine, and he's been my coach over the years, Joe McGowan, and his partner Fee McFarland. But we spent some time together. We were working together at the same gym at the time, and started training with Joe and some other guys that he was training and girls that he was training at the time. And that really made a huge difference to how I was training and what I was learning, and I guess it was directed towards powerlifting, so I learned a lot in that area. I was also recovering from my injuries as well, but it was great to get involved with him and start to learn underneath his coaching. So it was really great, and still to this day, still pretty close, and still learning a lot from him in the gym, and just in life lessons as well. He's been quite good.
So for those who don't know, Joe McGowan's a bit of a character in the fitness industry, and Joe has obviously been around himself, a competitor as well, and one of the well-known characters in the industry for being into powerlifting and doing a lot in that community in terms of coaching and fostering that community. So he's a well-known figure, been doing it for over 30 years, my understanding is, as well, working out various gyms and stuff like that as well. So so definitely some interest there. And interesting as well, right? Like, so you have, from an athletic point of view, you have your own mentors and so on. And as you said, from a life lesson point of view. And then did you want to tell us a little bit, I'm going to go back, there's a few things I want to touch on, but while we're here, what have you done in terms of powerlifting? Because you've done a lot in that in terms of obviously building your physique, a lot of weight training and so on. But you've competed in powerlifting comps yourself, haven't you?
No, I haven't competed officially in any powerlifting comps.
Okay.
Just the training has been there, and
Yeah.
but every time I've come up to the sort of weights that would be competitive, I've started to get some issues with my hip, etc., and
Yeah. Okay.
nervous issues and stuff down the leg. So it's complicated things a little bit.
Yeah.
Some of my lifts have been up there in the past, quite good, but yeah, I want to try and just keep working on things and build things up so I can get all three lifts together before I compete officially. And
Yeah. Perfect.
I mean, I did do some casual meets when I was younger with the powerlifting, but it was very casual, and it was just sort of mates catching up and doing some the 1RMs and
So the
the odd
underground
fun. But
comps.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. But that was all prior to the motorbike crash,
Yeah. Okay.
and I didn't have much experience back then as well. So
Yeah.
yeah, different times now, and a lot more knowledge behind me. So yeah,
Yeah. Awesome. And that's the thing, like powerlifting is one of those things that you can do later in life, because you have more muscle mass and so on, to help
just
you
takes
behind it.
time to.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
It's
you
the same
need
with
to work
bodybuilding.
on the strength. Yeah, it's just
Yeah.
it's time and years behind under your belt. It's very hard to build that strength in such a short time. You need to, really put the hours and the days and the months and the years into it, and
Yeah.
obviously there's a lot of learning behind that as well. So you really got to come at it smarter instead of just
Yeah.
rely on brute strength.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah.
it's a
Awesome.
key
Yeah.
point there.
Yeah. We don't need to be, an Eddie Hall recovering for several days and from several injuries and so on. So yeah, there's a couple of other points I wanted to go on. So like when we're talking about your first injury as well, like my understanding is that you, from previous conversations we've had, is that you almost lost your leg. So it wasn't just a total pelvic reconstruction, but you almost lost your right leg as well.
Yeah, that was part of it. I mean, because I was doing that type of training at the time of the first crash, powerlifting, etc. A lot of heavy weight training and a lot of accessory work, squats and deadlifts, and bench press, etc. The surgeon was quite impressed, with the physique, and he mentioned that if it wasn't for the muscle mass, in the leg and the hip, the leg would have been ripped off with the crash with the car.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, I was quite lucky there, and obviously in that area, your femoral artery
Yeah.
is super close to the hip joint, and
Yeah.
that was millimeters away from being nicked. So
Wow. So, but it was
incredibly
protected from the
lucky
amount of
there.
muscle mass that you had.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it was
Wow.
late, I guess.
Yeah.
So quite lucky.
All
Quite
right.
lucky there.
So there you go. That is today's best tip, I reckon. So one, if you're looking for an excuse to build lots more muscle, it's so that, if you end up in a motorbike crash, you get to keep your leg. And also you will impress doctors and they're less likely to take away limbs from you. So, if there's any reason to actually get some mass, that would be it. So I'm no longer do bodybuilding to get a nice aesthetically pleasing physique. It's just to make sure I get to keep all my limbs. There you go.
Exactly.
Right now, how many more motorbike accidents or sorry, I should say injury, because I don't want to suggest that they're all motorbike injuries, although, they might be. But yeah, so how many other injuries have you had of a serious nature due to potentially fast vehicles?
I guess the latest one that comes up is the third motorbike crash, which was this year actually, and again not as serious as the first one, but still put me back quite a bit with my training and my strength, and that was more just rib fractures than anything. So rib fractures, just hairline fractures, but I worked out how painful they are, and they do.
Yeah, like
stop
I
you from
said, it's
breathing.
just a hairline fracture, but
Yeah,
talk to us around how long that took to recover and the pain you're actually in.
So it happened on the Easter weekend. So I'm not sure how many weeks that is. Is it 7 weeks maybe? Almost 8 weeks, but I'm still feeling them now.
Oh,
So
wow.
there was, yeah, I mean, the scans that I got in hospital were, you know, bruising for the lungs and a lot of bruising through the ribs and the rib attachments, the cartilage that where the ribs attach to the spine, etc. And like I mentioned, yeah, it's still, I can still feel them at the moment. So my lifts have obviously that they've been halted, and I had to slow right down and sort of just gradually build back up. And yeah, the pain's slowly going away, which is great. But yeah, still working on. I mean, I probably just need a bit more time to let them recover a bit more, and I'll be able to start to push again a bit harder.
Yeah. Okay. So I think that's another key takeaway as well, right? Like, despite having some injuries, like, you just modify your training. You don't necessarily, unless it's absolutely required. Like, obviously the first one where you had the injury, you had to recover, then you got physio, and then you started to, progressively increase the weight, the training back in the gym. I think that's one of the misconceptions around. A lot of people will stop training altogether once they've got an injury, or really, just avoid training a particular area because of an injury suffered. But for yourself, you just, and I'm sure you did patients as well, you keep training, you just modify the exercises to suit the level of intensity and so on to actually assist with
Yeah.
recovery. Yeah.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, so like you mentioned, a lot of people actually stop training when they get an injury, or they'll totally leave that area alone and just won't train it because they're in pain, which is not always the correct way to go about it. So a lot of the time, people, they're confused about what to do. There'll be different advice from different specialists and doctors and health professionals. So really, I'd suggest that people, just as a rule, just always get a second opinion. Don't just go and see whoever, your doctor or the local physio or the ex-phys or whoever it may be, chiro, and then just you get the advice of, no, just don't train it for a few weeks, just have a rest. Sometimes that's the worst thing you can do. You actually need to keep it moving, keep blood flow through there. That'll speed up recovery. So again, yeah, for what I did, obviously modifying the lifts, using strapping and compression, things like that. Different. When I say modify the lifts, I mean different center of gravity for your barbell positions, using belt squats instead of back squats, etc., to not be loading
Yeah.
through the thorax. Stuff that will, you still keep you moving, and you can still keep strength training. You're just modifying, your movements and your exercises
Which makes
to
sense.
suit
Yeah.
your injury. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's the thing as well. There's so many different exercises. I mean, you can easily modify like a back squat to a xerxes squat or something like that, where you take the load completely off the back, but you're still keeping it through the legs, and then you're changing the center of gravity, as you said, and pushing through different muscle groups. So there's always a way around things. It's just about training smarter, as you said before, rather than ego lifting or just training for the sake of training or avoiding training. It's actually just training smarter.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. It all comes down to training smarter, avoiding injury or rehabbing correctly. You're not wasting time avoiding the exercise or certain exercises. You're not prolonging your recovery from avoiding too many exercises for that muscle group. I guess that's the main lesson there for people. So yeah.
Awesome. And then the other thing I want to talk about as well. So we've talked about your main sort of clients, which are, your rehab clients, but you also help athletes push through to the next level as well, in terms of correcting their form as well. So what type of athletes have you had, that you've had that you've worked with?
So I see, various people from powerlifting backgrounds, runners, triathletes, anyone who's, I mean, sometimes they'll come in with little injuries or niggles, or they're just not performing that well anymore. They're hitting plateaus. I'll see bodybuilders, and sometimes I see, you know, people just playing sports, different sports, tennis players, football players, cricket players. And I guess a lot of the time they are coming in with injuries, but also they want to improve their performance. So
Yeah.
they not only want to rehab their injury, but they want to perform better than they were prior.
Yeah.
And a lot of that comes down to, you know, again, their strength training programming. A lot of the time their strength conditioning coach isn't addressing all the parameters that they need to be.
Yeah.
Because you'll find that sometimes they're looking up to so many different athletes. They don't have time to put into certain specific people that need a little
Yeah.
bit more,
Yeah.
a little bit more focus. So
And I think
we can work on.
that's a good call out. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there, Chris. It's a good call out as well. Like, I think, you know, any good PT, you know, like for myself, I've referred out clients to yourself when either they've had an injury or something's not firing properly with some of their moves, just to get a second opinion on their biomechanics or to help get them to a level of conditioning that they can sustain bodybuilding training, for example. You know, so I think any good PT should be working with an allied health professional that, you know, focuses purely on biomechanics or rehab, you know, even physios and chiropractors or whatever other allied health that helps with the recovery of an athlete as well. So I guess any PTs listening as well, and you're looking for an exercise physiologist to help with some of you know, your clients and getting them to improve to the next level as well, then make sure you keep an eye out for someone like Chris, or and his details will be available at the end of this podcast as well if you want to get in contact with him. The other thing, and also you've had that just some other interesting types of athletes as well. Is it strongman, and what are the other types? There's all, so that in the powerlifting spectrum, there's like these sub divisions of, I guess, powerlifting kind of sports or strongman type of competitions.
Yeah, there's a whole bunch of different strength sports, but yeah, strongman is one of them, and I've been involved with a bit of strongman training, and I've trained with strongman competitors before. A lot of it's been more in the powerlifting realm, but still done some strongman training myself, just because it's a lot of the training is quite functional, and a bit different, but it's different type of strength, different movements, different equipment, which can be good. So when you're changing equipment, you're changing your movements and different movement patterns. It's all towards, you know, increasing overall strength and fitness. So that's been good, and just working with strongman athletes who are competing, addressing again little niggles and stuff like you know, with their backs or their shoulders or hips, but also just improving performance for those competitions and those competition lifts. It's been quite good, and quite, you know, it's been a learning curve, but yeah, it's been really good to do that as well.
And then the other thing is as well, for your own training, you mentioned as well that you mix it up in terms of, you know, changing movement patterns so that your body becomes a bit more functional and so on. But you've done a lot of bodybuilding training as well, with bodybuilders, and done some bodybuilding style training as well, to complement your powerlifting.
Yeah, I guess a lot of my rehab involved bodybuilding, just to try and get the symmetry back, build mass as well, so muscle mass surrounding, you know, all the joints in the body, not just for aesthetic look, but actually functional. You want to have, you know, symmetry through the body and balance. And I guess that's contributed to, you know, the rehab and my training in general. So it's been a combination of bodybuilding and powerlifting type training, and then the strongman on top of that. Which I think is a good sort of mix of different disciplines.
And I think that's another call out as well. So anyone who's looking to improve your performance, I mean, quite often if you have a look, even in the bodybuilding realm, for example, you know, the best bodybuilders have actually been, have also been really good powerlifters in their own right. You know, they might not have competed powerlifting, some of them have, but they'll switch between the two and mix up that style of training. So I think and then even some of them will do HIIT training or functional training, strength and conditioning as well. So it's a whole gamut. Sprinters, for example, do better when they do, some hypertrophy training and strength and conditioning training and with weights and so on. So there's plenty of sports and benefits. So it doesn't matter what type of athletic performance you're doing, at some point, potentially doing some weight training and having a look at your biomechanics is probably going to enhance your performance. So I guess anything else in terms of where are you working out of at the moment, and what's the best way for people to get in contact with you if they have an injury, or if they just want to basically just get in a couple of sessions with you just to check their form and that they're covering their entire training properly?
At the moment, I'm working out of Train Physio in East Perth, and I guess I've got my own Instagram, just CAXPhys, and Facebook, just my name, Chris Anastasios. If you Google me, my website will come up. It's pretty easy to find, and I mean, if anyone wants to get in contact, just give me a call or a message or a text, so we can set something up and go from there.
And I understand it's because you're an allied health professional as well. There's many subsidies that new clients, patients, athletes, whatever you want to call them, can potentially qualify for. What would they need to do to get that?
So if it's an injury, they can claim through Medicare. They need a GP referral. It's not too hard to set up. Just call up the GP and ask them for a care plan for Medicare to see an exercise physiologist, and that'll enable them to get a rebate to see me, or otherwise they can just go through their private healthcare and claim through that after the session as well. So depending on who you're with, you'll get a certain rebate from them as well.
Yeah, awesome. And you also, it's not just serious injuries that you help people with as well. Sometimes, as you said, it's just some niggles as well. So, it's not uncommon sometimes when you're practicing new lifts or something like that, or you're doing, you're increasing the intensity of your training, that something will pop up, because sometimes you don't know if you're doing something wrong until you're under load, or that you're changing something when you're under load.
It doesn't have to be serious injuries for
Yeah.
people to come and see me. It can be just, I want to improve performance, or my technique, my squat technique, or deadlift technique, or it could be just something to do with something in their training program isn't working too well. Let's have a look at that and why. Let's look at biomechanics, and let's do some screen testing as to find out what is not working that well or not working properly, and let's fix it.
Yeah. So there's a bit of preventative and optimization stuff. So preventative measures, optimization of athletic performance, and then rehab, which are pretty much your main specialties, which is awesome. Yeah, well, you're doing great things. Really powerful journey there as well. I don't think there's many people who can overcome 3 motorbike accidents and keep training and still help others doing the same. So yeah, really awesome work. Someone who's really passionate about it, knows their stuff, and I really like the fact as well that you still have a growth mindset and still think there's so much more that you can learn around different types of lifting and in terms of your own athletic, but also, how do you apply that to your clients and so on as well. So thanks so much for taking the time out today to talk with us here. And as we mentioned, you can get in contact with Chris through his social medias and his website. I'll make sure those details are included in any of the post details. And if you've got any questions for Chris or for us, or, any insights that you had, please shoot them through. I'd love to hear from you. All right. Thanks, everyone. Thank you for listening to yet another episode of AKA Fitness Connect. Really keen to see what your 3 key takeaways were from the podcast. So feel free to comment below, comment on the socials, connect with me on socials, or visit us at our Linktree site, AKA Fitness. Thank you.